Welcome to our presentation on how to use 123Sync to import web forms. The web forms supported by 123Sync are we do label for each field. We do multi-line fields, so you have a field that has multiple lines like a note. We support that. We also support 10 fields for duplicate matching, and you can actually create from a form, you can create a contact note. You can update a contact, or you can attach the email to the contact. We also provide unlimited forms, so you can create as many forms as you want. And the licensing is one form takes one user slot in 123Sync. Let's look at an email that you receive from a web form. The fields that are shown in blue, in bold blue, are the labels. So for each label, there's a field value with it. And the red here identifies the email identifier. So on the subject line, the email parsing mechanism will look for 123Sync contact us, and from there we'll say, oh, this is a web form, and then we'll parse the fields on the web form and then match them into the ACT fields. Also, we provide note creation, so you can actually put a note into a field like the note here, or you can create a note on the contact in ACT. So we'll show that with our demonstration. So to create a 123Sync web form parser, first you have to create an inactive ACT web form user, and we'll show you how to do that. Second, you just refresh the users in 123Sync admin and restart 123Sync. And then once you got the web form user selected, you enable it and then just set the email parsing parameters. Quite easy, and we'll show that in the demo following. Just for safety, we recommend you export the settings, especially if you have a very complex form. Just export the settings, and we'll show you how to do that. And the next time 123Sync is run, all the emails matching the form subject line will be parsed and then imported into ACT, and the appropriate measure be taken from your settings. So let's do step one, which is to create the ACT form user in ACT. We go to Tools, create on Manage Users, and then we just create a user here. Create a new user. Just create a new one. We call it Web Form Contact Us. I just go to standard users. We can put a password to it. Just go 123. And we just make him inactive. We don't want it to take an ACT user count. So we make this user inactive, go next. Just click on finish. So now we can see here, we have a web form contact us, and that's going to be the user or the user ID we use to set up all the web form data. So here we have 123Sync. And on the user list, we don't have the web form contact us users. So we go to Tools, Administration, and we refresh the users. So 123Sync will refresh the users and will tell you 123Sync has been refreshed. You must now restart 123Sync, and that's what we're gonna do. With 123Sync restarted, now we can see that we have the web form contact us user here. So we use that and go, okay, this is it. That's the web form contact us. And there's a couple of things we have to do to set it up. Since this is an inactive user, we cannot use the web form contact us to log in into ACT. So in this case, we're going to say, okay, we want to do this, and then go, just say we want to go as Chris Huffman. And we just put in the password and do a test to see if it can log in. And we'll tell you, yeah, we can log in. So the web form will log in as Chris Huffman into ACT. The second part of the setup is to find out how we're going to log in into Outlook, or how we're going to get the emails. You can go as Office 365 and make sure that it's all set up before you go into the next stage, which is how to set up the processing filter in 123Sync. In our case, we're going to go with Outlook, and we just leave it like this, and what it will do, it will pick up the default Outlook when we set up the folders. So we just go to process filter, and we say no, we don't want to process all the contacts, we want to process only the emails. We'll click on that, and so all these tabs are then of no use to you and just go straight to email. Here on the email tab, on the emails fields to search, you can actually set up all the fields that you want to search for. In our case, we'll just search for email and personal email. So you can have up to 10 fields to search for. Anything from a product number, anything that's a text field, you can actually search using 123Sync in Act. The next step is to set up the email integration settings. First thing to do is just to enable email integration. And since this is an email parsing mechanism, we just go to the inbox and just select the inbox where we're going to get the email from. Click on the icon and just opens the data that we have. So in this case, we're going to choose inbox 1. It shows you where the data resides. And if you look here on the integration starting date, this is when it's going to start integrating. So anything received before the August 25th, it will not process. So if you want to process forms that are older than this, you'll have to change the date here. But by default, we're just going to use this date. We are now ready to set up the inbox settings, how we're going to parse it. So we click on the inbox settings, and by default, we just match the sender's email address. And there's 3 options: sender email address on parse subject line or parse body text. We'll click on the web form, and you'll get the listing of all the fields that you want to match them for. So before we actually set up the fields, let's look at the data that we're going to be importing. For the purpose of this demonstration, we've created a folder called Inbox1 that has 2 emails that we've sent to ourselves that will test the form. We have the 123Sync download, 123Sync query. And these are fairly standard web forms that are provided. You'll have the product, first name, last name, organization, an email address, and then a note. And this note we're going to show how it's parsed. But before we do this, for our testing, we really want to be able to test it properly. So what we do is we select all the data on the form. Oh, let me see how we can. We select all the data and you copy it. Right click and click on copy. So from here we go into the 123Sync and we click on the test button. On the test button we click and we paste the data here. So now here we can have all the data set that we want to parse and how it's going to look in Act once we've done parsing it. The test data here will actually be saved with this user, so next time you click on this, the data will be shown here, so you can keep on testing. What we like to do is to keep this data open while we set up 123Sync. So before we get started, first thing we want to do is identify the email on the mailbox, and we do that by the subject line of the email. So we click on here and it's 123Sync download. So I just go here, click on copy and go back to 123Sync and just paste it here. So now if we find 123Sync download, we will actually start parsing that as a form. Let's now set up the fields. We go here and we find the first name. Here's our first name. We got the first name. This is the first name, and we right click. And the label is first name. So what I like to do, I just copy and paste here from the colon, just go here and just say, okay, this is the first name. Just search label, add edit, and we put the first name. That's what it's going to look for. And it looks until the end of line. And the first name, I would like to have it capitalized. So we click here and say capitalize the first name. And the act default, we really don't have an act default on this, so we leave that open, and we'll leave the note creation open as well. So the same thing we do with the last name. Click here and go to the last name. Just go down to L. There's last name. Same thing here. Search label. It's last name, and until the end of line, because that's going to be the last name of it. But we now have a very important item here, which is the email address. Let's just set up the email address. Email address. That would be this. So this is the email address that we're going to look. And this is the reason this is key, because it's a search field. If the search field does not exist or not parse, 123Sync will not parse the email. So the email address, and we just make it all lowercase. So string action, make it lowercase, act default nothing, and note nothing. So what we're going to do now is set up all the other fields. So we can see here that we set up phone to look for a phone, colon a search label until the end of line. And then we can go up the last name. The last name we want to capitalize as well. So let's do a capitalize on last name. And organization, it's organization on the email, but we wanted to match it to the company. So company goes to organization, EOL, and capitalize. So we can go back into our test form and then just test it. And here we can see, and this is what we're going to be scanning. So the company is going to be that, first name, last name, Chambers, and the phone number. So let's just now look at the notes field. So the next one is note. And on the note, we can match it into user 10, for example. We can say, okay, on a user 10, you can say, okay, this one here, we do and call it note. So we'll search through the note, but there's one difference here, because it's a multi-line field. And on a multi-line field, you gotta look, not the end label is not the end of line. The end label is another label after it. In our case, we can see here that after this, the note, there is snumsec field. So we can say, okay, this is the end of line. So we go the end label, and instead of end of line, we just call it snumsec. So now, when we look at it, let's go to the test and see what happens. So the user 10 now becomes a multi-line field that we put the data in there. So by just looking at the last field or the field that's right after it that is unique, and we'll search for everything in between. So let's just take this the notes creation or the multi-line fields one step further. In some context, in some situations, you may not want to have a multi-line field, because our multi-line fields are delimited by the amount of data that you can put in it. You want to create an act note to it. So you go to user 10 here and you just say, okay, I want this to be a note. So create a note in act. So when you scan the contact and we match it, we create the note in act with that data. So with that said, let's go to our test environment now that we have a note, and we'll click on the test button. So what you will see here when it says user 10, it's actually, there's a note abbreviate or a note here that says, oh, this is going to become a note in act. So user 10 will not be populated. What will be populated is we'll create a note when this content gets updated in act or created in act. What I like about this interface is that you can just click on the different panels and you can do changes to the parsing mechanism and very quickly just do a test right here without starting or going to multiple windows. So if we look at our email here, there's one piece that is missing, or one piece that is very commonly imported, but this email does not have, and that is the ID status. Let's go to ID status here. And we always like to put an ID status in ACT, so we're just gonna call a search label. We're gonna go ID status, okay? ID status, colon. And we'll search for ID status until the end of the line. On the email itself, there is no ID status. So what we can do is say, okay, if there is an ID status, that's good, but if it's not, let's just set an ACT default for it. We just call it, since this is a contact us, we just call it contact us. So what happens here is when we parse the email, if the result of the ID status parsing is nil, we put it to contact us on the ID status field in ACT. So let's just look at our test. Click here, and there it is. The ID status will be equal to contact us when we import this contact into ACT. So now that we've set up all the fields that we want to parse, we provided a mechanism that you can do backup of your settings, and with that backup you can create other email parsing forms with small modification and just import that backup. The mechanism to be used to do this, just go into the form, into the fields themselves, right click on it, and we provide a tools menu. And we can say export all fields to a file. So you can just export these fields and just call it, ACT form 1 export fields. And from here you can just export it like that, and it's done. So now if you want to import it, just right click, tools, import of all fields from a file, and then you just import the fields from that particular file, which is right here. So now that you've set up all the fields, there's a couple of settings that would be of interest in form processing. One of them is if you import a form and you want that a field to be set in ACT. So the form gets imported and you can set it to set ACT field as new form, for example. So every time this gets processed, or if a new content gets processed, then you have this field user9 will be set to new form. You can use any field to set that. That's one setting of interest. The other setting of interest is after you process the inbox, what do you want to do with the form? Do you want it to stay there? And there's a couple of options. One of them, you can leave it there. That clutters your inbox. But the other one is, do you want to delete it from the inbox? You can delete it, or you can just move it to another Outlook folder. Just click here, select your destination when you want to put that other form, and you can say like create a folder called like inbox master or something like that. And after it's processed, the email gets moved to this inbox master, and it stays there. So these are very two useful settings or post-processing options for the emails that you're processing. And last but not least is the ownership of the note and the contact. If a contact is created, by default we set it the web form contact us is the owner. But in many cases you don't want that. You want contact created by this particular form to be from somebody in particular. So what we offer is the record manager settings here. So for example, if we want to bring in a form and then say, oh, this contact belongs to somebody else, we can just say here and say select, and we can say, oh, we want to create it under Fred Fenderline. So when the contact, even though we logged in as Chris Huffman, and we using the web form contact us user, everything related to the contact and the attachment, the ownership of the attachment of the email, as well as the note, is going to come on the Fred Fenderline. So it's a very easy way so you can decide who is going to be taking care of this particular user. We ran the email parsing from the form, and this is what came up with our contact. John Chambers 123 Connect, salutation John, with the email address. And those were the data that we put in there. And in specific, you can see here the ID status is contact us, which was the default ID status that we set of fields that really did not exist on the actual form. So by setting this ID status, it goes by to that default. Now on the contact, let's look at the contact access. On the contact access, we can see it was set to record manager that we selected. So we set the record manager to be this particular user as Fred Fenderline, and that got created as Fred Fenderline, even though it was created by by Chris Huffman. So let's look at the history now and see what we get. We have the results, and this is the email. So the email has been attached of the form submission. And if you open the email, we can see that the record manager is Fred Fenderline. So it gets managed by the right person that we set up. And then let's look at the notes. And the notes, of course, the record manager is Fred Fenderline. And there's a note, and it just says, okay, this is what happened. So the note gets recorded here on the notes section straight off the email submission. This concludes our demonstration on how to input forms into ACT contacts. Please contact your integrator or just contact 123sync.com for more information. Come to our website. You can download an evaluation copy and give it a try and see how it works. Again, thank you for listening to our presentation. Have a good day.